Right. We're changing gears ever so slightly while we're looking at the creative aspects of customer experience. Now we're going to dive into the business process optimization aspects and customer service experience aspects of that user experience with Ty Gibbons. Ty, are you with me? And you're muted. Haha.
It's always something.
That's fine. You're here. Perfect.
How are you?
Hey, doing good. Good to have you with us here today. I'm going to share your screen and I'm going to let you take it away.
Perfection. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. This is Ty Gibbons, and I am from a company called The Workforce Pro. A little bit about us, and that's me on a much, much better day. This is me all the time, though. So if we ever end up on a call, this is what you're going to get. But essentially what we do is we work with companies that are on the verge of change. So you could be growing like crazy, or you can just want to be proactive with what could potentially be coming and get ahead of the customer experience curve. And what we do is we help to set you up for scale. And as Derek mentioned, that's done through business process optimization, which honestly sounds super boring, but I'm a nerd and I live for this stuff, so I like it a lot. And we help you with what we all know to be people, process, and technology. And I bring that up early because we're going to talk a lot about people, process, and tech throughout this presentation. But some of the clients that we've been fortunate to work with are some that you may know of. For example, Your Super, Thrive Cosmetics, Dixon, Ilia Beauty, Cadigan, Visibly, on and on. There are a few that I didn't list, obviously, but these are some of the ones that I think probably most people have heard of. And many of our clients repeat projects with us. So we'll end up doing, 2, 3, 4 different projects. Just really depends on what it is that they're trying to do. So first, thanks for having me. I hope that I am able to talk to educate you on some of the benefits of being a digitally native vertical brand. So there's pros and cons, obviously, but in my opinion, the pros outweigh the cons, but you're ultimately going to be the judge of that. One of the biggest benefits is that you have complete an end-to-end control of your customer experience. Throughout the presentation, I'm going to give you guys stories of different companies that I have worked at or with who were in this space, and how some of the recommendations that I'm giving you ended up working really well for them. So we're going to just go ahead and start talking about really quickly what the pros and cons are for being a digitally native vertical brand. So pros, you know what's happening with your customer from end to end. From the time that the customer signs up with that email address to the time that they place their first order, if that's what you do, to the time that something went wrong with that order. You'll know exactly what that is because you guys have everything in-house. It's yours. The only part of the process that likely may not live with you, that I'm sure doesn't live with you, is this once that order is picked up from, say, said warehouse and moves on to a third-party carrier. You don't necessarily have control over that piece. But even if that is the case, you have some controls. And I've found that a few brands that I've worked with did not have a claims process set up to be able to recover some dollars from missing or lost orders. For those that do high enough volume, you had negotiated an automatic kickback for those types of items. You also hadn't partnered with a company that could offer insurance at the time of checkout, and there are a few that do that. So all of these things are things that you should be doing. But essentially, you have control over pretty much everything end to end. You are the ultimate creator of your customer experience. And we got to take ownership. So when it comes down to it, if a customer is purchasing with you and they are not happy, I shouldn't say a customer because you're not going to make everybody happy, but for the most part, you definitely want to have happy clients, obviously. You want to understand what are customers telling you, even if it's something that you don't agree with. And I think that that's where we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot, is that we try to tell the customer what their problem is instead of accepting from the customer what the problem is. And if we focus on what the customer tells us, we're going to save a lot of time, energy, and effort. And we're going to stop spinning the wheel, because we're going to actually do what it is that they've asked for. Now, I have been I won't say the name of this company, but I worked for a company a while back, and they had a subscription-based model. And through surveys, they were told by people who were not purchasing that the reason they were signed up, but they weren't purchasing, that the reason why they weren't purchasing is because of the membership. So they canned the membership. So what's the problem there? You're letting non-customers tell you what to do with your customers. So again, listen to the people who are actually spending their money with you. They'll tell you what it is that they need. You can get super personal. I have educated myself by reading a few different articles on thoughts about DMVBs and whether or not personalization is the thing. I'm going to tell you from my vantage point. I heard the person before us, who was amazing, speak about inclusivity. I agree 100% that that is key and critical. And that is key and critical in CX as well. I've worked with numerous beauty brands. I can tell you, wow, let's go back really like maybe 2 or 3 years. One of the brands I worked with, when a male employee communicated with their customer, who was predominantly female, by way of chat, he had to chat as a female identifiable name, because the women at that time didn't feel that a man could give them advice. So you turn that around to today, and that's not the case anymore. So, excuse me, a person has to see themselves in your brand, right? And so we're in a space, as she mentioned, of inclusivity. And that's the world that we live in today. Much more open, much more diverse. So when it comes down to getting super personal, one of the arguments against that you'll see in the cons is around ROI, and I'll get to that in a moment. You can react much faster, right? So if something goes wrong, you have all the parts that you need to react very quickly. But more importantly, you can be proactive. And I think that moving from firefighter mode to fire prevention is really the key to having a great customer experience. Listen, guys, like, customer experience is not rocket science. It does feel that way sometimes once you start to pull back all of the layers and the lids and all that. But it really comes down to common sense, right? Treat people well, make them feel important, tell them the truth, and be accurate, handle things accurately, and do things that make sense. I've known many companies that have really backwards policies that make absolutely no sense. Just make sure that things make sense, right? And pay attention to your loopholes. So we'll talk about looking at your company from an outsider's perspective in just a little bit. All right, so some of the cons. One, the ROI may not be there. One article I read, and I don't have the link up right now, but I'll pull it and add it to the slides in case you guys want to see it. But one article I read talked about how businesses are spending so much money on, trying to personalize, that the ROI is just not there. And when you think about it, the overzealous personalization, does it actually go into what the customer wants, or is the customer just going to be happy and satisfied that you were able to deliver for them, right? And so, again, in a little bit, we're going to talk about some tools around this, but the question comes up, does it make sense to do all of the things that you think, or does it make sense to do what the customer says that they want? So you need to be listening to the customer. I'm just going to give you guys that one right away. All right, so how do you take advantage of your position as, a digitally native brand without breaking the bank? You're going to have to go backwards. So what does that mean? Earlier, I mentioned to you, we work with companies and we help them with people, process, and tech. And so now what I'm going to say with you is to focus on the tech, process, and people. Why? Well, a lot of companies make the mistake of hiring a bunch of people to solve their customer experience problems. And I can tell you that continuing to hire people, it costs a lot and it doesn't stop the processes from breaking down. There's just more people doing the processes poorly. So if you start backwards and you focus on the technology first, so you build your technology around the experience you want, and then you add the people in to fill in the gaps for the technology. All right, so let's talk about tech. Now I'm using a big word here, ERP, enterprise resource relationship system. I forgot that fast. Anyway, it's on here. I'm drawing a blank at the moment. But leveraging your ERP is going to be something that's going to help you to tell a full story from a technological perspective. Another is make sure that your systems are speaking to one another. And then creating self-service and automation for mundane and repetitive tasks. I'm going to go deeper on each of these, but I want to give you a high-level overview first. For process, you're going to measure the right KPIs and make sure that your cost per contact is 1. I work with a lot of new leaders in the CX space. I actually offer an apprenticeship to help people build the skill and knowledge that they want to get to the next level in CX. Most CX leaders that I work with who are pretty junior have no clue what it means to measure cost per contact. And that's going to take you back to the ROI piece. And it's super, super critical and important for you to know how much it costs for you to service your customer. If you don't know that, you want to know that. If you're a climbing leader, that's going to make you look real good. Make sure that you know it. You need to make customer listening part of your world, right? And that is, yes, reviewing tickets for quality. So a lot of times we focus so heavily on quality assurance. In today's world of texting, you'll often find, and I have nerve, y'all. I am the queen of typos. You've probably already seen some in here. So please take this next statement in the kindest way. But there's a lot of challenges with written communication. And we live in a world now where we're doing everything on our phones, right? So we're all texting all day long and we're using a lot of shorthand to do that. And you'll see that that translates into shorthand when people are messaging your customer, and that is not what you want. So in quality, we sometimes focus so heavily on the communication between the agent and the customer that we lose sight of what exactly is the customer saying, right? And so make sure that you are tracking your contacts to a point where you'll be able to refer back to that later and say, oh, this was driving volume. That's another common thing I see with newer leaders is that even times where we've done like a whole powerhouse optimization for them, which is when we go in, look at your processes and essentially say, this is what you need to do differently, or we'll come in and build out your CRM. And we always include a custom field or two that's designed to tell the story about what people are looking for. And I'll go back and chat with my clients and they're like, oh, we haven't used it yet. And it's mostly leaders who haven't been responsible for understanding what drives contact volume, who haven't been held accountable for understanding cost per contact. So I heavily encourage you. I don't care if you just started working yesterday. You want to know what drives your contacts. Or if you started your company yesterday, started your business. The other thing is to review your customer experience as an outsider. That can be really difficult to do. We'll go on to that in a moment. And then personalize where it makes sense. So I know that sometimes, excuse me, I've seen where clients have been hesitant to have anyone reply. So let's say that I message a customer writes in and I reply as Ty. And I ask that customer a question. And then the customer writes back in. A lot of my clients go, no, I want them to stay with just that one person. Let them talk to Ty again. The question is why? This company is not a client of mine at all. I've never worked with them, but I did really love the experience that I had. It's called Wayfair. And so once I rode into Wayfair, I was buying something or another. And I was conversing with someone, and somebody else replied back to me, but answered my question perfectly. I knew it was a different person because the name had changed, but I didn't feel like I was talking to a new person. And for some reason, I felt like that person understood what my issue was. And I feel like that is more important to the customer, that they get a nice, quick, clean response from someone who's knowledgeable, than it is that they see the same name each time. So that's just my 2 cents. But I've never, and I read a lot of emails and a lot of tickets, I've never seen a customer say, I want to talk back to the same person, unless that person asks them the same information over again, which has happened. And that's obviously not a great experience. So when we get to the people piece, because remember, we're working backwards now, you need to hire problem solvers. Not, well, okay, taking a experience I had with a previous client, she's a great leader, head of finance, and she did some work with CX, and I helped her. And we would talk about the different personality types within the business. And she would always say, she called it hammers versus nails. So I think so a hammer obviously pushes things, makes things happen. And a nail, with the help of the hammer, will do what it's intended to do. But it's only going to do what the hammer tells it, encourages, or pushes it to do, right? So you need a mixture of both. But at that core, you need problem solvers. And we'll talk a little bit about more characteristics there. You also want to provide continuous education. Always be learning, always be learning, always be learning. Encourage it. It's not going to do anything but make things better for them, which in turn makes things better for you. And create a safe space for feedback. I'm going to go into more detail on that one as well. So let's talk tech. There it is, enterprise resource planning. Okay, so I'm going to tell you guys a quick story. I used to work for a company called Intuit a long, long time ago, back when we only had phones, telling my age. And when I worked there, I used to be a workforce management leader, which is getting the right people in the right place at the right time. So it's all forecasting and capacity planning and scheduling. And it's also the namesake of my company, the Workforce Pro, which people always think is like, why do you call it that? You do CX. My foundation is in workforce management. So when I was doing that role, I was focused on the one division, which is just the contact center within the customer service team. And I was asked to take the WFM practices across the customer care group, which included more than just customer service. So I was advised by my mentor at the time to change the name of the business to resource planning. So in my mind, long story, I know, but every time I see resource planning, I kind of go back there. So that's why I got tripped up. But essentially, resource planning is a software that manages your day-to-day business activities. And it brings everything together. So I'll tell you a story about a company that I worked for. It is and was one of the fastest growing startups in Los Angeles. I started their customer experience team, grew it from 7 people to 130 in 9 months, and I still have gray hairs that prove it. So at that company, it was a DNVB. So it was very, I wouldn't say it definitely wasn't simple, but everything was in-house. And so we were able to communicate in a way that was pretty simple. So we didn't have an ERP. And I use the term ERP because it's important, but it's more about what it represents than it is about having the system, because depending on your size, you may not have the budget for that. But communication is key and critical. So I'll use an example of working at that company. Some of the use cases I talk about here, I'm going to tell stories with. So understanding the impact of shipping delays to your customers. I had a team member who was responsible for liaising with the warehouse. And every morning she would meet with the warehouse leaders to find out how many orders are they able to pack for the day. We'd also look at how many orders are delayed from the previous period. And we would proactively communicate to the customer if there was going to be a shipping delay. So let me back up. We also had to forecast the number of orders coming in that day. So let's say that the capacity of the warehouse, I need to use some really round numbers that are easy. So capacity of the warehouse to pack any day with 2,000 orders. If we had a 4,000 order day, we knew that we were going to be delayed on shipping by 2 days, packing and shipping, that is. So knowing that information, we proactively communicated to anyone who purchased that day that there may be a delay in shipping, and we saw a huge decrease and increase. Where's my order, right? Because we were proactive. With understanding the impacts of procurement delays, we sold very popular products well below retail. So when you do that, things would, people would be waiting for something to come back into stock. So I had a very, very close relationship with our buyer team, and we stayed on top of where are we with this product? Is it coming in? When is it coming in? To make sure that the team was abreast and knew what to say to the customer, which drove down escalations, right? And helped us to be, more proactive in our communication with them, right? Even if you have wish lists or wait lists or anything like that, staying on top of that and pushing messages out to let them know that it's not back yet, but it will, we're hoping it comes back soon. Those things help. Anything you can do to drive down volume without making people feel like you don't want to talk to them is a win. Knowing when you're running low on stock and avoiding overselling. So we literally would put a product on out of stock when we were down to a set number of items in inventory. So I don't remember what the number was, but let's say 100. We just say it's out of stock. Why? Because we don't know how many people are going to be trying to purchase that one who are still on the website. And we'd rather have a few to make, those few customers really happy than to have to contact customers after the fact to say, sorry, the item you ordered, it's not coming. And that's another process that you need to make sure that you have, because that's very common. For orders to be short shipped is what we called it. And most companies present those on a spreadsheet. If you have an ERP, there's a better way to communicate that and a better way to automate it. Yes, there's a cost, but think about how much it costs for you to have a full-time person doing those things as well. All right, so system integration. Excuse me. We're going to talk a lot about ticketing systems in this space because I'm focused on CX. Ticketing systems are our primary tool that we use. But essentially, all ticket systems are going to be designed to have really strong integrations. And they're all designed to simplify the workflow. So get the one that's right for you. There are many out there. There are some that are really strong with integrating with, say, Shopify. And then there are some that integrate with lots of other systems, and it doesn't matter. Get you something that feels good and works for you. And if you have questions on like how to assess a CRM, then you can schedule a free 15-minute session. I'll help you with that. So your ticketing system should connect to the back end of your website. Okay, telling another horror story. Everyone on my team of 130 had back-end access to the website. Can you imagine how many times a coupon got accidentally, excuse me, how many times a ticket got, a coupon got canceled or deleted or anything of the sort. It happened a lot. And it could be very embarrassing for the person who does it, even though their intentions are really honorable and good. So if you have a good ticketing system and it integrates with the back end of your website, you won't have to worry about giving them direct access to go into the website and do anything other than what they're expected to do. So that's important. Another thing is that you want to bring in all messaging where you can, SMS, Facebook, WhatsApp, all of those things. Now, I do know how important it is to have proper engagement on social. So when I'm talking social engagement, I'm not necessarily talking about, when I talk about the messaging coming through, I'm not talking about engagement on social, which is different. So engagement is liking, comments from your followers or people who are engaged with your page, commenting back with thanks and hearts and all those great things to let them know that you're here. Correcting some of the misinformation that people post. That's different. What I'm talking about is someone messaging you on the side, sending a support issue, DMing you because they have a problem or they need help. You want to connect that. Or you can also have a person from your CX team, if your systems are not able to integrate, because not all of them do, go and spend some time messaging or replying to customers who have challenges on social on behalf of you. So you want to have a process there. But ideal state is that there's a connection or an integration. And then you want to customize where you can and connect on a larger scale to tell a real story about the customer experience. So what do I mean by that? I work, so a current client of mine, one of the reasons why I was hesitant if I was going to bring them up, only because their tech or their CTO is borderline genius. I love working with them. I'm going to give them a shout out because I adore them so much. It's a company called Trescolori. They do custom jewelry. And I've purchased from them for myself, for family. Amazing, wonderful customer support team, everything. So when there's a challenge, right, with any type of customer communication, or a customer's asking for something, or a customer needs something, they take every opportunity to look at whether or not that's a fix that they can put in place for every issue just like that one. And the reason why I'm so in awe of them is because they just recently hired a second person, but their customer experience person worked like 300 tickets a day. And he was still very nice. But he did that because a lot of the systems, a lot of the processes that they had are heavily, heavily automated. And they have an ERP that speaks to their systems. And it just makes it easier for them to do a lot more with less. So, yeah, that one was great. Okay, so self-serve and automate. Okay, deflect, don't deter. And defect. I told you, typos. This is just me, y'all. So deflect is what I meant, not deter. What does that mean? You have a question, customer has a question, they write in with that question. You give them options to answer that question before they press send. Do they always read it? No. One of my favorite complaints that I get from CX team members is no one reads the FAQs. No one takes time to answer their own question. And I think what we fail to realize is that the customer doesn't work there, we do. So if the customer never decides to answer their own question, I mean, big whoop. They paid money for the product and they expect service with it. And that's a real thing. But you're going to get a percentage of people who are going to be much more happy to go to a self-service tool to answer their questions. And that can, and you want to just target them. Get the ones who want to do it. Wonderful. In addition to that, you want to make sure that you are automating replies for questions where the answer doesn't change. So your return policy doesn't change, right? It just is what it is. How do I get in touch? Your phone number, your email address, the chat widget, whatever you use, it doesn't change. So a lot of times I hear people say, I don't, my customer needs to hear from a person directly. We're not saying that they shouldn't, but what we're saying is that no customer gets upset for getting an answer to a question that was accurate and clear. They get frustrated when we hide behind technology and we don't address all of their issues. So if someone asks you, hey, what's your return policy? I actually wanted to return this shirt. It was too small. Do you have it in, size medium, as an example? And you write back, the return policy is to return your item within 30 days. Thank you. You didn't address all the issues. So we shouldn't be hiding behind automation in that sense. But what we should be able to do is, when the question is clean and clear, give them that information. But we want to make sure we address everything that the customer is looking for. That's what creates satisfaction. And a lot of times I see people hide behind macros and behind canned replies, and we don't want to do that. But if we're using self-service and we're automating properly, those funds can go back into making things super, super personal, which can also be invested into your ERP, or at least the communication process that you want to create. Or you guys can MacGyver tech. I MacGyver things all the time to create that experience. There's tools like Zapier and all sorts of things that will give you that same feel of super personalization, but for far, far less money. Excuse me. The next piece is processes. So I remember, and I know that this quote is from someone else, but my old boss said to me one time, what gets measured gets done, and that's factual. So from a customer standpoint, you want to have the basics. Your there's some people call it inventory, but how many contacts are you getting? You want to know which channels you're getting those on as well. Chat is always going to be a more efficient channel. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you want to think about efficiency, it's going to be live chat, email, then phones, because a phone, although emails are one-to-one, you have a lot more time to reply to it. A phone, you got to get that person right then and there. You might say, well, how is it that chat's more efficient? Well, if you have somebody or a couple of people who are really solid at multitasking, they can manage 3, 4, 5 chats at once. And so now you're servicing 3, 4, or 5 customers in that one engagement, and you're getting to them a lot faster. So, but anyway, I was on a tangent. You want to know your wait time, abandonment rates, or your drop rates. So abandonment, I'm showing my age again, that goes back to phone calls. These are not abandoned calls in the sense that it's basically abandoned in the queue. So not a call that's disconnected before it gets to a person, but a call that gets disconnected once that call is in queue. You want to know how many times that's happening, and when it's happening, and how long does it take, because that's going to tell you your customer tolerance, and that's going to help you with your staffing, so that you'll know how soon do you need to, how many people do you need to staff to make sure that you can get to calls more efficiently. And then you want to know how much it costs to service a customer. I get often asked, what's a good cost per contact? And I hate to tell you that it's relative. Let me scare the heck out of you and tell you, 15 years ago, it was like $11, $10 to $11. In a more recent life, call it 6 or 7 years ago, it was $3. So, and that was because we had an email channel as well as phones. Phones is always going to be more expensive though. But if your customer demands it, like, there's ways that you can set that up to make everybody happy. From an agent standpoint, you should know the capacity of the employee. Not everyone's going to do the same things at the same rate and the same pace, but you want to be in a space where you can understand what is your agent capacity, how many contacts are they able to handle and still be sane, because no one talks about employee sanity. Customer experience is a rough job. 9 times out of 10, people are not calling to tell you how much they love you. So you can imagine being responsible for things that you really have no ownership of, and hearing, people complain a lot. It can be very taxing. So please be sensitive to your CX team and show them love. However, to continue on what things you should be measuring, their strengths related to the service. You might have someone who's really great on chat and not so great on phones. And then you might have somebody who's really great on email and not great on chat. So play to their strengths. Another thing is how well they service the customer, which is the quality piece. So yes, quality is important. I know I talked about that earlier. I kind of smushed it to the side a little bit, but quality is super, super important because it helps you to create a consistent experience for your customer. I often encourage my clients to build a persona, like who is the company? 9 times out of 10, a company is a person. For example, I have a team that works with me, but the Workforce Pro is me. So I will have a complete connection fit if my clients aren't treated appropriately. Even if we disagree on something, there's still an appropriate way to do it, because it's almost like the client is just talking to me and I'm talking to the client, right? So that's going to be very important. And we also need to create a way to funnel customer feedback. What are your customers saying? Again, this is aside from just quality. Did you handle it right? All that's important, but what is the customer saying? That's what you need to pay attention to. You need to stay objective and try to experience your customer as an outsider. It's hard, but you can't make excuses. One of the things I do if I'm going to work with a company and overhaul their CX or even set up their CX, I have to be a customer. I'm going to purchase. I am going to see what that feels like. Sometimes I'll do a return. I want to see what that feels like. I'm going to engage with the frontline team anonymously. I want to see what that feels like. And I'm doing it all objectively. No excuses. What happened? What did I expect to happen? What needs to happen? So you want to make sure that you have that. If you're not able to objectively do it, ask a loved one to do it. Someone who's kind of critical though, so that they can give you some real feedback that you can action. And then the last thing is make it personal. Fake it till you make it, right? So your ERM is going to do well with personalized experiences. If you can get it all together with your MacGyver situation, be it Zapier or anything else. But making sure that the team understands the importance of the customer. I think that gets lost a lot. I won't say which coffee shop because there are a few well-known ones, but one of my pet peeves is going into the coffee shop and seeing people behind the counter doing things other than, doing things other than servicing the client primarily, if that makes any sense. So if you're watching the machine instead, and there are people at the counter, I think that that's not a good idea. But the customer, right, comes first. So if your team understands how important the customer is, they're going to be the ones to deliver that experience because they understand how important it is from you. And one thing you can also do is keep some really good notes on the customer itself. I'm going to speed up because I'm running out of time. So hire problem solvers, I talked about that. Some of the traits to look for is curious, intuitive, empathetic, and resourceful. Google is here for all of us. How do you do something? How can I do something? It's probably Googleable. So let's Google it first. I think that resourceful people are really key and critical to the success of any company. Make learning a requirement. Excuse me. That means that you need to provide continuous learning opportunities and you need to encourage them to go and find their own learning opportunities. So that's going to be a win for you. And then safety first. One of the things I encourage team members to do is to point out their own mistakes. And you should encourage that too. I always say I only make mistakes on days that end with Y. I've made a few today. I'm going to make some tomorrow, but the goal is to make new mistakes. So create a space where it's safe for them, and you'll be surprised what you learn about the customer experience through transparency from your employees. All right. So in closing, Six Sigma says that you should only be doing what the customer requires, whatever the customer expects. Anything else it's just a waste of time. And I know that that might be difficult to say, but don't advocate on something for your customer that the customer hasn't told you is a problem. Go after what the customer tells you is a problem, and you will see some results. All right. If you need some help, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thanks, Ty. I'm going to share all this right now in chat. Let me
Thank you.
How fast can I type? Let's find out. workforcepro.com and Ty at workforcepro.com. I love it. Amazing. Oh man, I had a thought. It's escaping me just now. It's going to come back to me in a second, but I wanted to talk to you. Oh, it's forgetting about the term ERP. It's funny because that's why we don't use acronyms in our companies, because like if we can't remember it off the top of our head 100% of the time, then what you're doing is making other people figure out what that acronym is. But, that was just one thing. But it was a great presentation. Really appreciate it. And we're going to move right on into our next session.
Thank you so much. Have a good one, y'all.